There's been some chatter on the internet lately concerning what would be another housing crisis, a housing Armageddon, if you will. You gotta love economic fear porn, right? One of the things that helps to drive views to channels such as this one is talking about things and circumstances where the entire economy could blow up, right? The housing market could be completely destroyed because of this circumstance or that circumstance. Is the circumstances that may cause this upcoming housing crisis, if there is a housing crisis to come, what are precipitating those things? You probably already know all of these things, but you probably haven't put it all together. And once you do put it all together, you probably need to decide, is this really gonna be the next crisis that affects the US or the global economy and your pocketbook personally? Let me just say this to help you save some time if you're in a hurry. The answer is no. There probably isn't going to be a housing crisis. Not the same way there was in 2008, 2009 at the very least. There could be a housing crisis in another situation, from another angle. Let's talk about that in this upcoming video. So what's causing some of the consternation, some of the fear that is causing some individuals to talk about a potential housing crisis in the next couple of months, maybe year or two? Well, starting with everyone's favorite economic phenomenon, inflation. Persistent inflation, that is. I'm sure you've been affected, and I know we all have been affected by inflation rates being higher than normal. I know what normal would be in this particular circumstance, right? But higher than usual over the last 2 to 3 years. Higher than they've been in a long time, probably since the late 80s or late 70s, early 80s. And of course, that's causing everybody to have less money in their pocket. And of course, that situation is causing political ramifications across this great nation of ours. And those political ramifications, whatever they may turn out in the upcoming election, well, they're affecting decisions made by decision makers. But the one decision maker who shouldn't be affected at all by politics in any way would be the Federal Reserve Chairman. Everyone's favorite Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell. He's sort of faced with a Hobson's choice. Find some way to keep printing money or keep getting money into the economy, stimulating it, quote unquote, to ensure that the economy doesn't go down, but at the same time, keeping inflation rather hot. Or you could reel in inflation with the various mechanisms that are available to do such a thing, reeling in inflation, that is, cause the economy to take a nosedive of some sort, some sector, somewhere. So right now, Jerome Powell is racking his brain trying to think, what is the best way to navigate this situation? I said Hobson's choice earlier. I think that's an appropriate way to describe it. Sophie's choice, maybe? I'm not sure what type of choice this really is, but the truth is, it's a hard decision to make. Rock in a hard place type situation. And Jerome Powell, he's facing it right now. And all the Federal Reserve Board chairmen across the country, the individual Federal Reserve banks, also are facing this issue. And as I'm sure you've heard, there's going to be some sort of rate loosening in 2024. Sometime in the near future, maybe later towards the end of the year, post-election, that sort of thing. But in the meantime, rates have been staying steady. And that's part of what's causing some people to feel as though the next shoe to drop, the next big time economic fallout is going to be the housing market. Let me explain why. And no, I'm not talking about necessarily the commercial real estate market that I'm sure we're all aware of. Commercial real estate contracts coming up in the near future. What's going to happen there? Will individuals be able to afford the new rates to, I guess, keep the money flowing for some of their projects, some of their commercial real estate investments? That's a separate video for a separate time. What I'm talking about here is the residential housing market. If you take a look at the 30-year fixed rate for mortgages in a couple of states using a mortgage calculator for top credit scores, 700, 750 plus, you can take a look and you can see for yourself that the average mortgage rate for someone with that kind of credit score is going to be 7+%. And it's even worse for scores just under the prime credit score. That level of interest payment is discouraging a lot of people from diving deep, headfirst, into the housing market, as it should. As you know, one of the ways to maintain and keep yourself in a debt spiral is to continually pay a lot of interest for big purchases, little purchases, any kind of purchase. One of the ways that financial, not necessarily going to say gurus, but people that are in the know about finance, is that you want to avoid paying interest as much as possible. And you want to accrue interest as much as possible. That's the number one way, probably the only way really, to flip the debt spiral into your favor, to get the flywheel of success with earning and growing your wealth, to move in your favor instead of grinding you into poverty, into dust. Being on the opposite side of the debt spiral, well, that's key. And going into a situation where you owe 7% or more on a mortgage that you're going to pay off for 30 years, that's going to put you in a position that is not going to be great for you. I talked many times on this channel that if you pay a 30-year mortgage the whole way through, buy a house, you put down 20%. The reason you're putting down 20%, that is you want to get a mortgage to get that house right now, right here. The problem then becomes, as you're paying off that mortgage, particularly if you take all 30 years to pay it off, and you don't use any techniques or strategies to pay it off, in a lot of circumstances, even with lower interest rates in a lower interest rate environment, a lot of individuals end up paying double for the very house that they just purchased. So if you purchase a $300,000 house and you take all 30 years to pay off that mortgage, and you don't use any technique to accelerate your payment schedule, or heaven forbid, you fall behind on some payments. For some reason, you lose your job in a bad economic environment, as an example. You can end up paying double for that same house. So a $300,000 house becomes a $600,000 outlay from your bank account. And as you might imagine, the opportunity cost of paying $600,000 instead of $300,000 for your personal wealth alone, well, it's not great. Even if the house that you purchased doubled in price. I have a separate video on that topic. It's going to be somewhere in the bar or on the screen, wherever YouTube is placing these things nowadays. But take a look at that for a more in-depth analysis on that very topic. But people today are smartly choosing to maybe delay purchasing their first home, their second home, getting a refinance on their home because of high interest rates. And the theory is that will cause the housing market, houses in general, to fall in price in some real estate markets. In some places, you can see that happening. For example, Austin, some places in northern Florida, and other places, not so much. California, for example. California is one of those places where supply is really constricted. So the price is going to continually rise, artificially, but continually rise, simply because there's just not a lot of supply coming onto the marketplace. And even in such a restricted environment where people are sort of scared to get into housing and mortgages, etc., simply because there's just so fewer houses available for people to buy, for people to get into, the ones that still need to buy, for whatever reason, are just not able to, driving the cost up even higher. So in that particular circumstance, the housing market probably will not collapse or crater, causing another big time recession. But the question is there going to be any economic calamity from the current situation that we're facing with high interest rates? I think anybody would tell you that high interest rates running for a long time will cause the economy to, in some respects, not perform as well as it could. And frankly, that's just sort of the nature of how the economic beast is. If you have too much money floating around, chasing too few goods, you're simply just going to have inflation. And that inflation is going to squeeze consumers more and more. The only way to get rid of that is to pull money out of the economy. And that's going to cause interest rates to go higher. And that probably will cause, in certain markets, housing prices to fall, particularly in places where there aren't such supply restrictions, such as California, or where there aren't legions of people moving to escape such housing restrictions, like Texas. Places where maybe it's not as popular or sexy to move to, like Ohio or Minnesota, Virginia, places like that are probably going to experience a little bit of a housing pullback. And that's going to affect the pocketbooks of a lot of people and banks and other entities, frankly. So in a sense, yes, there probably is going to be some sort of housing Armageddon coming up in the very near future. But this housing Armageddon is going to be different than the last housing Armageddon, where in 2008, 2009, that particular situation where mortgage holders faced a scenario where the mortgage that they owed was greater than the value of their house. And legions of people abandoned their own mortgages, or worse yet, couldn't even pay their mortgages because they lost their job for some reason, probably as a side effect of some of the earlier economic calamities that were faced in the 2006-2007 crisis. That scenario, where those same mortgages, which were in effect chopped up and passed around, traded between banks and other financial institutions, which suddenly became worthless, causing domino effects across the financial sector, effectively making some entities too big to quote-unquote fail. This housing Armageddon is going to be different than that housing Armageddon in that lending practices are generally better. We may run into a situation where some mortgages are larger than the outlay of the house or the actual value of the house. Like I mentioned, in places where it's not quite as sexy to move to. I don't suspect it will be as systemic. And in some of the regions that I described, California, Texas, Florida, which were effectively the epicenter of the last housing crisis, we're probably not going to see that happen this time around. Let me know where I'm making a mistake. Where is my analysis wrong? Let me know in the comments down below. One thing that I think you should keep in mind is that if you're in the market for a house, timing the market is probably not going to work. For the same reason that waiting and timing the stock market is probably not going to work for you. You have to jump in feet first and to sort of experience the market as it ebbs and flows. There really is not going to be any perfect time for you to buy at any time. The truth is, you'll have to navigate the housing market no matter what situation you're in currently, whether rates are high or rates are low. Now, I've talked about different reasons why owning a home is probably not all it's cracked up to be. High interest rates today, probably another reason to add on top of the list. But I have a video on that topic that perhaps you should explore. Check it out. Should be in the link below, somewhere on the screen right now, for you to click on and take a look at. But remember, a goal without a plan is a wish. A goal with a plan and no action is a wish list. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Derek West, Finance Squared. Like, subscribe, click the notification bell. Peace.